Hello and welcome to another episode of Pobsa's Dharma Lounge. Think of this as a time and a place to just relax and discuss, learn about all things Dharma. Hi and welcome. I'm Pobsa Frank Jude, and I'm well aware that it's been a very long time since the last episode. I once again intend to be a little bit more upfront with doing these episodes at least once a month, maybe even twice a month going forward. But despite the fact that it's been a long time, there have been some of you who have been very supportive. The dana has continued to come in, so I really appreciate it. Those who have been sending dana, I want to honor by naming you. Jenny Kendall, Chingu Jason Cummings, Karen Carson, Chatra Sandy Greenberg, Jiu Ted Robbins, Ilchu Andre Talbot, and Gabion Sally Weber. Really appreciate your support. And I would also like to take this opportunity to remind those of you who are watching or listening to this that any dana of any amount is always really deeply appreciated, right? Some have taken to doing it on a regular basis, like monthly, as little as $5 or even less, but if you're moved to, it will be really greatly appreciated. That aside, perhaps one of the biggest and best ways you can support this podcast is by subscribing. I know that there are many more who are listening and watching than who have subscribed. And subscription is really the best way that you could support this podcast because that's what generates the ability to find this podcast for others, right? The more subscribers, the more visibility. So please, it doesn't take much. Just click on subscribe if you're on YouTube. That's all it takes. On the other hand, if you subscribed already, why not hit like? Maybe do a review if there's a review possibility, as long as it's a good one. All right. Again, I want to thank those of you who support this. Another way that you could actually support this show, this podcast, is by sending in any requests for topics that you'd like discussed. All right. In fact, this episode is the result of a request from a student that, I think I first met her in the early 90s in New York. Benedetta Capana, a wonderful dancer and wonderful yoga practitioner and teacher. And she specifically requested the contemplation on the elements. Now, at the time, I think she's actually requesting my own. What I've done is I've created a meditation based on elements as we understand it on the periodic table of the elements. But there's a traditional understanding of the 4 or 5 elements that are found in the Indian philosophical tradition. And I thought it would be a good idea to maybe present that first. And then in the next episode, I can present my approach with the contemporary understanding. So the contemplation on the elements is found in the first domain or foundation of mindfulness presented in the Satipatthana-Sutta. Right? Real brief, in case you're not familiar, or just to remind you, the first domain of mindfulness is the body. And in the Satipatthana, it begins with awareness of breathing. then it extends to the whole body, body parts, the positions rather of the body, the activities of the body, then the anatomical parts, then the elements. And then it concludes with the decomposition of the body. Right? So with the elements, we find that the Satipatthana describes contemplation of the four elements. And this is one translation. One examines the body, however it is placed, however disposed, by way of the elements. In this body, there are the earth element, the water element, the fire element, and the wind element. Now, wind is also sometimes understood as air. So from the grossest to the most subtle element, we have earth, water, fire, and air. But elsewhere, we hear of the fifth element, space. And in the Indian philosophical traditions, these five are called the five Mahabhutas, the five great elements. And if you've done any reading of Ayurveda or know anything about Ayurveda, you're probably already familiar with these five elements because they form the three doshas. That's nothing for us to be concerned about right now. The main thing, though, is we mustn't think of these elements as merely reducible to physical reality. We should think of them more as qualities or principles. And it's also important to understand that from the orientation of the Buddhist teachings, they are not to be posited as any form of essentialism or atomism. Right? All phenomena are made of all four or five elements. For instance, in another sutta, we're told that a tree is not merely the manifestation of the earth element, but of the others as well, because each quality is present. Earth as the solid wood substance, water as sap, fire as the temperature of the tree, and air as its motion. So, as qualities, let's go through these elements. The earth element represents principles of hardness, solidity, density, stiffness, resistance. When you press up against something hard, you feel that resistance. It's associated with the sense of smell. Water obviously represents liquidity, wetness, but also cohesion. It's often described in some of the Ayurvedic texts like when you add water to earth, you get mud, and mud is sticky. There's cohesion there. That's kapha, right? One of the three doshas. Water is also the source of life, right? It represents fecundity, fertility, and it's associated with the sense of taste. An interesting little experiment that I did with my daughter when she was much younger was I had her dry her tongue with a little paper towel and then put a little sugar on it. And there was no real experience of sweetness until I added a drop of water. Right? So it's the saliva in our mouth that helps us to have the fullness of the savoring of taste, of experience. Fire represents the full range of temperature, manifesting as different degrees of warmth and heat. And in the body, it's also the function of metabolism, most notably in digestion, where we are told that, the digestion burns away the food, releasing energy and creating waste. And it's associated with the sense of sight. Air or wind embodies the principle of motion, movement, vibration, oscillation. In Ayurveda, it's emphasized that all movement, right, the physical movement of my body as I raise my hand, lower my hand, as well as the movement of emotion and thought. All of this is related to air. And touch is the sense that's associated with air. And then finally, if we do add in space, we get the principle of boundlessness, of expansiveness, emptiness, and also that which contains all that which is. Right? And sound is the sense associated with space. So right now, to get a sense of this before the contemplation, I invite you to close your eyes as long as you're in a safe situation and you're not driving or anything. Right? Close your eyes and just take a moment to get a sense of these elements in the body by first clamping down on your teeth, right? Really clamp down, grit them together to get a feel for their hardness and as a manifestation of the earth element. Now, obviously, the earth element is responsible for the substantiality of the body, but it's most present in the hardest structures like the teeth and your bones. Next, if you move your tongue around your teeth, you might gather saliva in your mouth and then swallow it. And notice the dryness of the mouth gradually becomes moist as saliva once again begins to accumulate in your mouth. We can remember that each cell of your body is filled with liquid. And liquid bathes every cell as well. Depending on what you read, you might have been told that we're about 2/3 water. Right? So along with saliva, you can contemplate the other bodily liquids such as plasma, blood, lymph, tears, perspiration, the digestive juices, right? In all of these, we find the predominance of the water element. Now, if you bring your palms together and rub them vigorously, right, when you do that, the friction will generate some warmth in your hands, right? Life itself is a matter of combustion, and your body is always generating close to 100 degrees of heat. Fire is represented throughout the metabolic processes of the body. Now, with your next breath, see if you can feel the movement of the air entering and leaving your nostrils, while the belly rises and falls. While air and movement permeate the body, it's most evident in respiration. Now, in the actual contemplation, which isn't going to be very long anyway, don't tie yourself up in knots trying to feel each element distinctly. Right? We just start with the substantial reality of the matter making up your body. Right? You can sense its solidity, its temperature, the sense of its cohesion, its movement. But then we could also contemplate the space that all of this takes up, right? The body takes up space in 3 dimensions and in time. And all of this takes place within space. The reason for this contemplation involves ultimately the cultivation of the understanding of the not-self nature of reality. Right? This is the core teaching of the Buddha. And one way of understanding this, right, so that we don't get into the sense of essentializing, this is the earth element, this is where it is in the body. In mindfulness yoga classes, I often point out, when you're standing in Tadasana or mountain pose, you're standing upright on your own 2 feet, you're going to feel a much greater sense of solidity in the soles of your feet, making contact with the earth, and maybe up into your legs. But up in the shoulders and head, there's going to be a little bit of a sense of swaying, right? So that's where the air element is going to be dominant, feeling much more earth in the bottom of the body and a little bit more air at the top of the body. But then go into a shoulder stand or a handstand, and you're going to feel that your legs are filled with air. And if you're in a handstand, your hands and arms are going to be really experiencing that solidity, the density of the earth element, right? So how we experience these elements in the body will relate to and be determined by the very posture and position of the body. So let's contemplate the 5 elements. And close your eyes, again, if you're in a safe place, and just bring awareness to the parts of your body that are in direct contact with the chair, if you're in a chair, on the floor, what parts of your body are in touch with the floor. So for instance, I'm sitting in a chair, and I can really feel my buttocks and the back of my thighs touching the chair, So there's a sense of heaviness there, solidity and density. I also feel it in the soles of my feet on the floor. So that's where I'm experiencing the earth element most in this particular posture, sitting on this chair. So notice where you're feeling that. And then from there, we can just contemplate the very form and structure of your body. You can imagine the skeleton. That's the most hard, earth-like part of the body. You can use your hands even to feel your knee, the kneecap. Become more aware of the bony structure. Feel the bones in your arm. Maybe tap your head. Feel that skull. This is all the manifestation of the earth element in the body. And then again, maybe move your tongue around in your mouth, creating some saliva in the mouth and swallowing it down. And it's a little bit more abstract, perhaps, besides the saliva, to contemplate the water principle in the body, but we can begin at the top of the head. Right under that bony skull is the brain, and it's bathed in cerebral spinal fluid. Your eyes are bathed by liquid that can become tears. The mucus in your sinuses is predominantly the water principle. Again, the saliva, the synovial fluid that lubricates all your joints, the blood that flows through your circulatory system, the lymph of the lymphatic system, the acids and biles that make up your digestive juices. Just have a sense, just imagine even the cells of your body bathed in liquid, filled with so much liquid. The very fact that your body coheres as a unit is because of the water binding the earth. As you bring attention to the fire principle in the body, notice if there are any areas of your body where you feel more warmth than others. For instance, as I sit here, I can feel more warmth in my face, especially forehead and temples, around my eyes, then much more heat there than there is in my exposed shins or my arms. Take your palms together like we did before, and once again, rub them vigorously. Feel that heat build up, and then palm your eyes. Take your palms over your eyes and see if that warmth can have an effect on the muscles around your eyes. Soothing, relaxing. Almost as if they're melting away some of the solidity briefly. As we move our attention to the air element, feel the belly rising and falling. It's hopefully a very obvious movement. See if you can feel your ribs expand and contract. Maybe the shoulders lift and fall. That's the obvious movement. And then direct your attention to your nostrils. It might be more subtle there, so if you don't feel the movement of the air in and out of the nostrils, take a few forceful breaths. Notice where you feel it. Like me, you might notice that the in-breath you feel on the inner nostrils, the rim of the nostrils. When you exhale, you feel it there, but also the very middle of the upper lip. And as still as you try to sit, notice that there's a little bit of movement. Maybe nothing anyone would see. But there's just a little bit of movement as you breathe in and breathe out. And then imagine the three-dimensional space your body's taking up, and how all of the experience of the other elements arises in this space. The experience of movement in this space. The experience of heat in this space of the body. The experience of water and the experience of solidity. As the Heart Sutra says, form is empty. Emptiness is form. With an awareness of the body, you may notice that there's no real hard and fast sense of separation between the space of the body and the space external or around the body. If you don't wiggle your fingers, can you really feel them as separate from the space around them? We could also understand the space of awareness. We are aware of the body, of its solidity, of its temperature, of its movement, all of the thoughts and images and emotions, all of this arising, changing, fading in this space of awareness. And again, in this space, the experience of the other four elements. The movement, the heat, the liquidity, and the solidity. All here. After the next inhalation, as you exhale, let the eyes open. I hope you enjoyed that short contemplation on the 5 elements of the body. And I hope that you join me in the next episode where we look at the contemporary approach to the elements. Meanwhile, please remember, subscribe, share, review, and stay well.